Call to order our select board meeting for the evening of June 19th, 2019. Any adjustments?
No.
No adjustments to the agenda. Yes.
I make a request. I should like to speak on item 5G. I don't know how long it'll be before it comes up, but I would like to get out of here so I can be at Yellow Barn by 7:20 if it were possible to advance it on the agenda.
I think that will easily get there with time for you
Thank you.
to speak. So,
Thank you.
okay. Approval of minutes. Motion to approve minutes.
I move that we approve the minutes from June 5th, 2019.
And I second that.
Moved and seconded to approve the minutes of June 5th, 2019 as presented. If there's no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, public comment on items not on the agenda. Does anybody in the public have a comment on something that's not already listed for us? Doesn't look like it. Okay, so restoration. First thing on our list of select board items is the restoration status update from our town clerk, Jonathan Johnson.
Thank you. I am Jonathan Johnson, the town clerk. I think I brought this mainly for David. State law requires that we maintain certain records. This is the guidebook to what we have to keep. And one of the things that we have to keep is the grand list. And I brought 3 examples to show you conditions. This is the grand list from 1827, a grand list from 1840, and a grand list from 1910. When we had Rachel Onoff from the Vermont State Archives in to tour our vault, this was one of the sections of documents that she identified that needed to be addressed right away. After she came in, we got 2 estimates, and I've detailed those estimates. I asked Howard Fairman to come in, and because I know he's concerned about these things, to look at the 2 estimates with me. And he said, why don't we send them up to Rachel? So we sent them up to Rachel, and you've read her comments. The 2 estimates, one is from CoFile, it's a nationwide company. Their estimate was $32,000 to do 1900 to 1963. Carolyn Friesa from Bellows Falls works on paper. She also came in and gave us an estimate. And Howard, Rachel Onoff, and I all liked her proposal better. Plus, I like keeping the money in the community. So I'd like her to get started. She proposes that we do this over 2 to 5 years. I like that because we don't want to spend all of our money at once just in case we have something. The preservation fund currently has a balance of roughly $83,000. And the way that money is created is when someone records a deed, it's $10 a page. $4 of that by state law goes into the restoration fund. So my recommendation there is to authorize up to $10,000 to be paid from the preservation fund to start conserving old grand lists, working with Works on Paper. She sent us a bill for $1,080 for the work that she's done so far in assessing the collection and developing a plan. The next thing is that we've talked about surveys, and the surveys are not very user-friendly. When a realtor, architect, homeowner comes in, it's very difficult to access surveys without damaging them. And one of the recommendations from the Vermont State Archives was that we buy archival folders, and you put about 4 surveys per folder. And we got an estimate on that of $1,356.15. And then, so the recommendation there is that we approve the purchase of those folders. And then a lister, Eileen Shute, has been doing a lot of that work for us in terms of categorizing the surveys, alphabetizing them, numbering them, and we pay her we've previously authorized to pay her $15 an hour for that work. I'd like her to continue working on that project. And then finally, we have a mold problem. You know, I've been to a bunch of vaults around Windham County. We're the only one with a basement. And you can see, especially the 1910, and in the reports from the preservationists, we have a mold problem. We were using 2 dehumidifiers. One has died. They're roughly $200. I'd like to buy a new one. I'd also like to get a humidity sensor so we can kind of track what the extent of our problem is. And then before the meeting, Howard and I were talking, and I think it's a great idea, seeing if we can have somebody come in and try to solve our humidity problem. Any questions?
Do you have a sense that, this all sounds good to me, do you have a sense of how, for total scope of work, Carolyn Frissa's estimate is going to compare to the co-file estimate? Or
I think it's going to be roughly the same,
same ballpark?
but the work that she does is of higher quality,
Yeah.
and is more in line with what the state archivist recommended.
Yeah.
And that's why I'd like to go with her. She's not going to cut up the books and put them in multiple volumes, which is one of the things that Rachel commented on.
But we don't think that it's going to cost twice that?
No, I don't.
Okay.
No. And really, Co-File's a national company with lots of staff. I mean, they have offices in all 50 states. You know, they'll just do it all at once.
Yeah.
Carolyn is going to be slower,
Yeah.
but better work, and with a lower yearly expenditure. For 2018, the Preservation Fund was $6,000. So we're looking at $5,000 to $7,000 a year that fund grows by, based on,
Yeah.
you know, so this, spending a little bit of the money, but we're making it back, and we're doing something that has to be done.
What
So,
about this, the grand list before 1900, are we gonna deal with that, or there's a?
well,
or, I mean,
Co-File didn't even look at those.
Right. We're not required to keep
Work,
that?
no, works on paper, Carolyn Frissa, she did address that issue. And those are gonna be the most expensive ones, about $300 a book. And then the newer ones from, say, the early 20th century, she indicates about $200 a book. And then the more recent ones, including the ones that are printed on pin feed computer paper, $100 a book. You know, so
So, and am I safe in assuming there's one book per year?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, this is the grand list that we do every year.
Right, yeah.
This is at the tax
Yeah.
rate.
Yeah. So just translating that.
It appears that we do not have all of the grand lists. There are years where grand lists are missing,
That's,
but it was before any of us were born. And I don't know how you get those back.
yeah.
And there's rules about how we care for them.
Right.
Do we have to keep them forever? Is
Yes.
it like,
Yeah.
we have to keep them forever? That's the
Have
law.
to keep them forever, that's the law.
Okay.
And does this, I would assume that this would, well, I don't see in here that this is part of the process, but I might have just missed it. But I would assume that this would also make it easier if we chose to, for us to digitize them, just because of access to them, or, I mean,
The problem is that some of them are in unusual formats.
so it'd mostly be photographic.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we could certainly scan them into our system.
Yeah.
You know, none of them are bigger than the scanner that we have, which is a different problem than surveys.
Yeah. This all sounds good to me.
Sounds good to me too.
Need some chairs back here.
There's one chair right here.
And then there's several more over here that folks can come and help themselves to.
We can make a motion for this.
I think so.
Well, we could have it moved and seconded and then.
It's not shuffling, it's not all paperwork. So I move that the town clerk be authorized to spend up to $12,000 in document conservation, survey storage, and environmental monitoring and control. Additionally, I move that the town continue to pay Eileen Shute for professional services at the rate of $15 per hour.
I second that.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded as stated, so that opens it for discussion. Do people have questions or comments? Mr. Fairman?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I can say that the town clerk invited me to have a look at his proposal before this meeting this afternoon, which I did, and I support it wholly. I think everyone has done a good job.
Good, thank you.
I also have a letter from Ruth Barton from the Historical
Yeah, I
Society.
saw that, yeah.
Um,
So Ruth just says it's addressed to Karen. The Putney Historical Society Board is pleased to learn that the Putney Select Board has begun the process of preserving town records. We understand that Rachel Onoff, who is the coordinator of the Vermont Historical Records Program, gives great recommendations for these projects. So we have followed that recommendation, and
Thank you.
appears that we're on the right track. Any further discussion? If no, then all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you, you guys put so much effort into
Take my
this.
tools and go home.
Don't take those home with you.
Yeah, these are back in the vault.
All right, Historical Society lease of Town Hall second floor.
Okay, back July 12th, 2018, there was a letter to myself regarding the second floor and the possibility of leasing the space for the Historical Society. It hasn't gained much steam, but you had asked me to get a quote to install a sprinkler system. Southern Vermont Sprinkler.
Which is required if we were going to use it as a public space.
Correct, so second floor, first floor, and basement, I'm told by Tom Goddard, Fire
Would be
Chief,
required.
is required, and it's required through passive VLCT, our insurance company.
Okay.
Southern Vermont Sprinkler will be here on Friday in the afternoon to do a walkthrough
Okay.
and possibly give us an estimate to do that.
Okay.
Now, as you know, there was a feasibility study done back in 2005 for renovation of the building.
Yes.
So these numbers are outdated, it does need to be revised. The only thing I could find in there for like a sprinkler system was like for $7,200. And those numbers are really old.
Yeah.
So,
And 7,200 was not enough
Yep.
even then.
Yep, and that would be in like a new town hall building. That's like new construction. So
that has nothing to do with this.
right. As far as the sprinkler system for the second floor, approximately $425,000 to renovate the entire second floor, and the sprinkler system cost is within that number.
Yeah.
So I can't break it out because these are just way too old.
So we'll see what Southern Vermont says.
Yeah. So the Historical Society is here tonight. They are still pursuing a lease for the second floor.
Okay, well, let's find out what, and Tom will be here to walk through it with them as
Tom's already
possible.
done a walkthrough with Wade.
Okay,
He's with the insurance company.
right,
And Tom's noted, and that's why we have to do second, first, and basement. It's gonna take more, obviously, but their interest is to at least get some sort of acknowledgement, maybe that this could happen.
Yeah.
sounds good. Let's find out what they have to say. Anything else on that topic?
I don't know, there are, Carolyn, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Well, I think we were just wondering what your concerns were since you haven't agreed to a lease. Is there anything besides the sprinklers and the cost that would prevent you from allowing us to use the second floor?
I don't believe so. I mean, I think that with the idea in this discussion was that we needed to look at insurance and health safety in order to make it something we can legally do. And then, you know, once we've overcome that hurdle, then we go from there. But
Yeah,
no,
that would be great, because once we have that agreement, then we can apply for grants, like for an
Right.
elevator and other things like
Yeah.
that.
I think the general consensus was that was an appropriate and good use of that space, but it obviously needs to be brought to a safe enough state to be able to be used safely for that purpose. Eva?
As I recall in that study, there was talk about an elevator. I wouldn't want to see the town of Putney Historical Society moved in a place that's not accessible.
We've talked about that, and I think Carol maybe was referencing this. One of their goals would be to get an elevator in, but until they have that lease in place, they're unlikely to secure grant funding for that. So that was part of our discussion the last time we talked about it, especially if it was going to be used for, you know, sort of larger public access purposes, and then it would be a requirement, but I think it's something we'd all like to see happen anyway. So,
Thank you.
yeah. All right, library standing recommendation.
Oh, sorry. Emily's here. I was waiting for Emily.
That's fine. I'm happy to speak. Meredith Wade, our board chair, the library board chair, and Abijah Reed, who's on the building committee, are also here with us tonight. Last night, the board voted to recommend that the select board accept the
Bid.
thank you, from Momany Painters to stain the library building.
So it's $13,800. We put it out to bid twice. It was a mandatory pre-bid meeting. We had one contractor show up, so we only have one bid. Painters are very busy with the weather. And so Momany Painters out of Dummerston gave us the estimate for $13,800. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Emily, but, so that's for one coat. So the south side of the library is faded from the sun, and it may require 2 coats. Now, if Momany does 2 coats, he would do the entire building. And that would be an additional $4,000.
What?
If he does 2 coats, he would do 2 coats for the entire building.
Yes.
Okay.
Why not just do the south side?
Exactly, yeah.
Why not just do that side?
Jack, why not just do the south side?
I'm not
We
sure.
didn't ask him that.
Well, we talked about that too.
Yeah.
And,
It might look different, I don't know.
well, and that's the
but-
thing, like he said, because it's faded so much. And what he has, there's a whole process, so he has to
Right.
spray with bleach and get the mold off of there first. And that'll lighten it up a little more, but we talked about just doing the south side, but then we don't know if we can match it, so.
Remind me how often does this have to be done?
This is the first time it will have been done since the library was built 15 years ago.
Okay.
Sort of a typical average is anywhere from 10 to 15 years, depending.
Depending on the, okay.
Okay.
My call is that, you know, if one side needs 2 coats and the rest needs 1, let's give one side 2 coats and the rest of it 1. I mean, how many times are you gonna stand exactly in the corner and match the colors? I mean, who cares? As long as the wood's preserved, really. That's kind of that's how I feel about it. But, you know, I'm not a painter.
No, I would tend to agree with you, and I would imagine that Mo would be receptive to that idea.
Right.
Of just saying, hey, you know, do what's necessary and not more.
Right.
So, I mean, he's pretty practical about that kind of thing.
He's very-
That's the spirit of it. I think
Yeah.
he was saying if the entire building needs 2 coats,
Then it would.
then it would be $4,000 more than the
Right.
initial bid.
Yeah. So,
Motion?
yeah, please.
I move that we accept the bid from Humane Painters in the amount of $13,800 for staining and various finishes at Putney Public Library.
And would you like to add to that motion that we would approve up to $4,000 to be spent for additional coats as necessary, with the intention to do as little as possible?
Yep.
Yes, I'll add that we will approve up to $4,000 for additional staining, with the intention to do as much as needed and as little as possible.
And I second that.
Been moved and seconded to approve the bid for Momini Painters as presented. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Thank you for getting the bid. When do they, I think it's, did he say when he's thinking of?
He has until October,
Yeah.
maybe November, but it'll be later in the year.
Okay.
Well, doesn't want to be too late in the year.
Yeah.
but
The
Could
thing
be
with,
snow on the ground.
Well, you don't,
Yeah.
you want the stain to get it
Yeah.
on dry.
Yeah.
well, with Mo Momini, when he gets on a building, he
They
stays
Go right
there.
after it. Yeah.
Yes. So he'll start and finish within like less than a week.
And will you need to shut down at least part of that time, or?
I don't believe so. I think we'll be able to direct traffic
Alternate
to
doors.
different doors.
Yeah.
That's the intention.
All right, sounds good. Good, thank you. Okay, next on our agenda, Highway FY 2020 Grants and Aid. So this is related to grant programs that are being issued for the improvement of, sort of related to roads and water quality. And it's basically road improvements that directly affect water, bodies of water.
Stormwater. Yeah.
Referred to as hydrologically connected. And we have done already some of this around town, but
Yeah.
it's an increasing requirement from the state, so getting grant money for it is a good idea.
So in front of you is a letter of intent that would need to be executed by the select board. Putney right now is authorized up to $21,625, which means the state would grant $17,300. And the 20% local match from the town is $4,325, which can be in-kind services, which would mean the highway crew could do some of the work, and we wouldn't have to pay those funds. So it's my recommendation, and Brian's, that we go ahead and do the letter of intent to participate in the Municipal Roads Grants and Aid Program. And this happens every year.
Yeah.
I move that we sign the letter of intent to participate in the Municipal Roads Grants and Aid Program.
And I second that.
It's been moved and seconded to sign a letter of intent to participate in the Municipal Roads Grants and Aid Program with an estimated contribution from the state of $17,300 and a possible, or a cash or in-kind match of the town of $4,325 for a total of $21,625. Any discussion? Mr. Fairman?
Just to ask a question of the town manager, I know, our weather being what it is, the roads are suffering all the time. Is this enough money to pretty much bring things up to date, or just do the worst?
Yeah, we prioritize, and Brian does that. And every year we'll get this grant money, so we do what we can with as much as we're offered. So we try to do the high priority ones first. There are other grants out there that we can try to tap into for the bigger projects. But I know Tavern Hill And
Has
High-Low
been,
Biddy,
has been done, High-Low
Yeah.
Biddy has been done,
River Road was grants and aid.
yeah.
So you'll see little bits and pieces, but
And it's prioritizing, and for the most part, really what this is, you know, as we've done it in the past, we've used the state money to purchase riprap, which then the highway crew installs in a state mandated method with certain crown and certain runoff ditch lengths and things, but
Nice.
we can only afford to purchase X amount of riprap with the money they supply, so that limits the distance we can do it, but,
Out of curiosity, Mr. Chairman, does the riprap come from our new gravel pit?
at least some of it has historically. It will continue to, and I don't actually know. I remember a conversation about this, and I can't remember the outcome of the conversation, but there was some thought that we would be able to maximize the amount of gravel that we could purchase with the state money because we will have access to it for less.
Of course.
But there was also then discussion about the fact that the state mandates pricing, et cetera, so whether, sort of how that would fit, I don't know what, it will come from that pit, but will it be cheaper because of that? I'm not sure.
Sure.
So we'll see how that plays out, but yes, I would assume all of it would come from that pit, I would
Thank
think.
you.
Any further discussion? All right, it's been moved and seconded to sign a letter of intent to participate in the Municipal Roads Grants and Aid Program. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Okay, next on our agenda, I had one here. Windham County Sheriff's Office contract renewal. So we already had a discussion about this, and then we were looking at, the discussion was essentially centered around the number of hours we needed, and Karen was gonna get in touch with them and see whether they had a specific recommendation and or how it would adjust pricing if we went with something different.
So I did make 2 phone calls, Sheriff Clark and Mark Anderson, who is, I think he's like a
Intern right
No, that won't happen until July 1st because Sheriff Clark
Is
still
still-
can retract.
Right,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so, but yeah, he's put his resume in.
Okay.
I spoke to both of them, and it was of their opinion that, for the town of Putney, that we remain at the 2,000 hours. There are some hot spots in Putney right now that they are watching. And at any time, we can change, if we feel there's too much,
We can shift it
we
back.
can reduce the hours.
Okay.
We're not, just because we're signing this contract, they will work with us to amend it. But at this point, it's recommended that we stay at the 2,000 hours per year.
Which we're budgeted for.
We are budgeted for that. And from the reports from the Sheriff's Department every month, they are doing 200 hours a month in Putney.
I have a question. When we talk about hotspots, are we talking about our issue with drugs?
They didn't elaborate.
Yeah, because I know we have a problem.
There's things going on in Putney, and they are aware of certain things, and they are watching.
Because I know Needle's down by the river and various other places.
All right, and as we discussed before, you know, because of the hourly rate that we get by going to that increased number of hours.
We
it's,
really don't
you know,
save anything.
Well,
Cuts our
we
savings
get,
back.
well, we get a lower hourly rate per hour when we go but overall the contract is more expensive, so in
Right.
theory, we're getting a sort of a better deal by going with more hours. And, you know, we spend more money, but we get more hours at a lower rate, so.
Correct.
That's what it is.
So right now, the hourly rate would be $40.65 for 2,000 hours annually. So if we went to 1,000 hours, the rate would be $51 an hour. So,
All right, so, motion to approve the contract.
I move that we approve the contract for law enforcement services from the Windham County Sheriff's Office in the amount of 200 hours per month.
And a total cost of $81,300.
Total cost of $81,300.
And I second that.
Been moved and seconded to accept the proposed contract from the Windham County Sheriff's Office for the amount of 2,000 hours a year in the amount of $81,300 for the annual contract. That would be, we can approve Karen for that. So, and that would also include appointing, if a friendly amendment, include appointing Karen to be the duly authorized agent for signature.
Yes.
Any further discussion, questions? Mr. Fairman?
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify something that you mentioned, Ms. Astley, the local Democratic Committee recommended Mr. Anderson to the governor as the sole candidate. I'm not sure whether the governor has acted yet.
Not that I'm aware of.
Not that I'm aware of either. But it appears that it will be Sheriff Anderson in due course.
Unless the governor chooses otherwise.
Of course.
So we'll find out. But-
July 1st, I think we'll know.
All right, any other questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, so next is the contract for animal holding. We also had discussions surrounding this, and the nature of our discussion was essentially that we weren't sure whether we had any other options, and that historically, the Windham County Humane Society has done well for us when we have needed them. It's a sort of seemingly somewhat expensive insurance plan for having them available to us, but when we need them, they're the option we have, and so it's a valuable insurance program for us. And we were going to explore possibly whether Vermont, New Hampshire.
I did make some phone calls, Josh, as you asked. So I called Vermont, New Hampshire Veterinary Clinic. They're not housed to board aggressive animals.
Yeah,
So they referred me to VCA, which is on Putney Road, behind Snell's.
yeah,
Was the veterinary place.
yeah.
Again, they do case-by-case basis with a vicious or aggressive dog. So, just so you know, Windham County Humane Society will not take aggressive animals. So we don't really have a place to put them. And VCA is an option at this point, as far as Windham Humane Society for strays, cats, dogs. I think for now, they're a good option.
They're the best
Yeah.
option for us.
Their contract also went up like $111 for the year, which is not a substantial increase. And they did take in like 9 cats from Putney last year. No dogs, which is a good thing.
But as we discussed before,
Yeah.
luck of the draw.
Yeah. 6-1, bad dog, bad situation.
Right.
Yeah, and that $110 will be cheap.
So it is my recommendation to stay with Windham County Humane Society for our stray animals.
So
Would
moved.
be the- that's good, yeah. I move that we continue on with the contract for animal holding through Windham County Humane Society in the amount of $786 annually.
That's all we
Yeah,
need.
that's all we need.
Second?
And second that, yep.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the contract for animal holding at Windham County Humane Society in the amount of $786. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. And again, Karen can sign it back.
Okay.
I don't know whether that's her copy or not, but, okay. Next on our agenda, Equity and Inclusion Committee resolution. So, I don't know whether you want to, do you want to present something about this, or does somebody want to present something about it? I have some questions about the language as it's presented. And I think my feeling would be, I had enough questions about it, so I'm guessing we might not get to approving it tonight, but
Okay.
I think if you want to just sort of give an overview, and then if people want to weigh in.
Okay. So the idea behind this was to create a town equity and inclusion committee, which is no longer unusual in Vermont. A lot of towns and organizations are adopting similar committees. The purpose of the committee would be to identify and address inequities and encourage inclusive practices in town services, programs, human resource practices, and decision-making processes. And the goal is to ensure that all residents and town employees receive equal treatment and opportunity regardless of, but not limited to, race, color, religion, ancestry, national origin, income, wealth, veteran status, sexual orientation, age, marital status, familial status, disability, gender identity, and gender expression. It would be comprised of 5 folks from Putney. It would be bound by open meeting law, and then we would, the select board would give some charges to get the committee going. Some of the charges that I recommended were that the committee would look into communication practices to promote greater accessibility of town-related information to all stakeholders, to decide upon recommendations to the select board regarding measures that will create opportunities for select board, town staff, and volunteers to address and challenge instances of inequity such as racial diversity, economic inequity, or implicit bias training programs for the purpose of supporting an equitable and inclusive environment in Putney, ensuring that Putney is a safe and welcoming place. One of the other charges would be to recommend to the select board regarding hiring practices that will contribute positively to increasing the diversity of town staff, to review contract service providers, for example, the sheriff's office, their policies, and assess their alignment with this committee's recommendations to the select board. And then to recommend whether or not this needs to be a permanent advisory committee, and to make recommendations regarding scheduling meetings, etc. This came from some issues I had seen taking place in other towns throughout Putney, and then some issues throughout Vermont, thank you, not Putney, throughout Vermont, to, I think, get ahead of some of the issues that I've seen in other communities. For example, in Brattleboro, they are questioning why they don't have a single person of color staffed throughout the town of Brattleboro, or didn't at the time that they started addressing these issues. And then I believe it was in Hartford, they had an issue where a select board member said some very racist things, and they had no recourse for that. So they were behind the ball on it, and I would like for our town to get ahead of the ball on it and to actually set policy and set systems in place before we have problems. I also see that throughout our community, when I was working towards joining the select board or being voted onto the select board, I had a lot of folks come to me to discuss things that had happened to them throughout our community, microaggressions that had taken place. And though I don't think we as a town can address specific instances like that, I do think that we can model behaviors and systems that can help set the culture in our town. So that's it. Any questions?
Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, I am critiquing, not necessarily opposing, because like you, I have some questions about the language, which I should like to address, if I may. A Town of Putney Equity and Inclusion Committee must comply with the Constitution of the State of Vermont and Vermont statutes. This resolution does not, yet. Your colleague, Ms. Chapman, drafted this resolution by privately inviting people to collaborate with her online via Google Docs. I replied, given that she is a select person, we were at the fine line dividing private discussion from public discussion mandated by the Vermont Open Meeting Law, and would repeat my comments publicly here. The Constitution of the State of Vermont, Chapter 1, Article 6, states that all power being originally inherent in and consequently derived from the people, therefore, all officers of government, whether legislative or executive, are their trustees and servants, and at all times in a legal way accountable to them. The Vermont Supreme Court has affirmed in Welch v. Siri that, quote, the remedy contemplated by Article 6 is that of popular election, unquote. A committee appointed by a Vermont Select Board, unless otherwise enabled by Vermont statute, such as a Development Review Board, can have no governmental powers nor authority because this committee is not accountable to the people via popular election and therefore can only be advisory. This resolution states, the purpose of the Town of Putney Equity and Inclusion Committee is to identify and address inequities and encourage inclusive practices in town services, programs, human resource practices, and decision-making processes. Identifying and address inequities entail investigative, regulatory, managerial, and supervisory powers and authority that the proposed Town of Putney Equity and Inclusion Committee cannot possess nor exercise because it cannot govern nor manage, but only advise. Further, this resolution states, all meetings held by the Town of Putney Equity and Inclusion Committee will be open to the public unless an issue arises that requires an executive session. The Vermont Open Meeting Law states, a public body, including a committee appointed by a select board, may not hold an executive session except to consider one or more of the following, none among 15 of which applies to a Town of Putney Equity and Inclusion Committee. While proponents may assert that a Town of Putney Equity and Inclusion Committee needs to meet confidentially with complainants, it is only advisory in compliance with the Constitution of the State of Vermont and cannot possess nor exercise governmental or managerial powers and authority legally belonging to and exercised by the Town of Putney Select Board or Town Manager, or by relevant state authorities such as the Vermont Human Rights Commission and the Vermont Department of Labor. This resolution states regular meetings will be held each month. The meeting times and locations will be posted at the town clerk's office 1 week prior to the scheduled meeting. The Vermont Open Meeting Law requires that regular meetings of a public body happen on the same day of a month at the same time in the same public place, and that agendas be posted at least 48 hours beforehand, quote, in or near the municipality office and in at least 2 other designated public places in the municipality, unquote. This resolution states the Town of Putney Equity and Inclusion Committee will be composed of 5 members appointed by the Select Board of the Town of Putney. The Town of Putney Equity and Inclusion Committee should itself be equitable and inclusive. This resolution should state, having been publicly invited to submit public letters of interest and having been publicly interviewed by the Select Board of the Town of Putney and interested citizens and employees of the Town of Putney, 5 Putney residents will be appointed to the Town of Putney Equity and Inclusion Committee. And finally, this resolution states, the terms of the committee members shall be as follows: 3 one-year terms, 1 2-year term, 1 3-year term. That was a quotation, end of quotation. Members having 3 or 2-year terms are privileged. Members having 1-year terms are disadvantaged. Every committee member should have the same term so that all members are equal. So I thank you for your consideration, and I reiterate, I am critiquing, not necessarily opposing, if and when revised appropriately. And I have copies for you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think you covered all the concerns I had.
This went through VLCT too, so this was their boilerplate.
Yeah, no, I was actually a little surprised because you had mentioned that before.
It went through them twice.
Right.
So, you know, how we want to address this, I think that we need to be very cautious in process. You know, I'm acutely aware of the fact that even organizations that are well-funded and do this well get themselves potentially in trouble with equity and inclusion and diversity questions. I think it's a great idea, and I totally agree with you that being ahead of the ball on this is a really good idea. But I think we need to be really cautious not to create problems that we don't yet have in the interest of solving problems, and sort of how to do that. I personally wondered, and I didn't think of the issue of people presenting. A committee of 5 seemed relatively small. Most of our committees are limited to either 7 or 9. And I, you know, that's not, but that was just a question I had. Also, all members will be residents of the town of Putney. To me, that seemed, what if we had somebody who was great, who was from Brattleboro and wanted to be on it?
I'm okay with that. Like I said, this was pretty much boilerplate what
Yeah,
I got,
yeah.
and then I took my research and plugged it into a boilerplate from VLCT.
Yeah.
So I am actually, when I consulted with the NAACP, they were recommending that we encouraged folks that were, because we have folks that work in town and have lived experience,
Yeah.
that they could bring to this committee. So I would be all for changing that number.
Okay.
So, in fact, most of Howard's recommendations I'm really comfortable with.
Yeah, again, most of my observations were similar. I mean, the 3-year term, 1-year term, 2-year term, typically our town appointed committees are just annual appointments. Some of them aren't, but,
Yes,
but,
rotate, which is good, because then at least you have some people, with new people coming on,
Yeah,
you have experienced people.
yeah.
So if they're rotating, but
um,
advisory committees, though, I believe they are like 1 term.
exactly, I'm pretty sure. That was another question is, you know, is it an ad hoc committee?
Right.
Or is it, you know, and you sort of addressed that later of the question of permanent advisory committee. So I think we would want it to be an ad hoc committee to start with, which would certainly be a relatively short term.
I'm also very comfortable changing the language in the beginning where we talk about to identify and address to be, to identify and advise.
Yes, I think that's important. It would be clearly an advisory, yeah, because, you know, we certainly would want to be very cautious about the legal implications of anything related to, you know, addressing inequities. You know, the legal liabilities are dramatic on, you know, sort of all sides of that issue, so we just have to be careful. And I think that we would, you know, certainly advising as far as human resource practices, but I think we would want to be very cautious not to have a committee being involved in our hiring process, because
No, that's
that
our
I
job.
don't think would be appropriate.
We have a personnel policy too, Laura, that I
Right.
will share with you.
Yeah,
If you already, you
I
must
think I
have.
already, I think we approved
You've got a
it.
copy, yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
if you read through that, most of,
It covers a lot of this, but I would
Yes.
like to see it reviewed by others.
and we also have the Public Safety Committee,
Mhm.
which gets charged with certain things, you know, and affordable housing, you know, so the whole equity
Yeah.
and hiring and all of that.
Those are pieces of.
They're
Right.
all pieces of
They're
a bigger
pieces,
picture.
but we have
Yeah.
to consider them as well.
Yes.
Josh?
Then I don't know about the legality. I'm not aware of any one of our committees other than the DRB and or the BCA having the ability to enter an executive session. I can't imagine that would be the case.
Again,
Right.
boilerplate.
Yeah, I
So I'm
don't
happy to
know
take
why.
it out.
So I think, you know, but how I saw that was if they feel the need to request an executive session with the select board for any reason, that's fine.
Right.
But I don't think a committee can just enter executive session because, as Mr. Fairman pointed out, none of the criteria for that would apply to this type of.
Correct, because there's only 3 reasons why you go
Right,
into
and none of
executive
those
session.
are applicable,
Right.
so.
Yeah.
Eva?
Yeah, 7 people once a month. Anyway, I think that having been on the Affordable Housing Committee, and also you and I both years ago on the Accessibility Committee,
Yeah.
it's a challenge to get people to be on committees, one, and I would say we'd be mindful when appropriate, but to say once a month, I mean, we need to think about being realistic here. And
Yeah, I'm not aware, that was news to me that they are required to meet monthly, and I'm not second guessing your information, I just wasn't aware that that was a requirement. So I think we would have to look at the statutory aspect of that and, you know, preferably sort of be able to say once a month on a specific date or as necessary or something, you know, I'm not
being
sure how that would
on
work.
our White Whitney Fund, we didn't realize that we should be posting.
Yes.
You know, so
Yeah.
there's no information, in my experience being on town committees, of being given information like this, or saying these are something, the situation you should be aware of. And I applaud Laura for bringing this forward.
Yes.
1. 2, I'd like it to be very realistic that, you know, the number of, if it has to be 5 to 7, Lord have mercy, there have been times when we just beg.
No, it's not required that we have that many, it's limited to that many.
Are you concerned that there won't be enough people in
I'm
Putney
concerned
that
that
would
won't
be?
be enough people, I'm curious about that, to see that on other committees that I've been. So if this is put forward, please, let's educate the people who serve on the committee about requirements, because we sure as hell never posted Affordable Housing Committee for years, and then all of a sudden, or the Wright Whitney Fund all of a sudden. So we've been
Yeah.
running illegal here till Howard came to town.
Straighten us out.
Yeah,
Well, that was back in the old days too.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the,
Yeah.
going through a resolution like this. So,
Yeah, no, to look at bringing stuff up to date. I mean, you know, open meeting law obviously has been there for a long time, but the push to adhere to it closely at the town committee level has not been there for that long. So, Jamie?
I'm Jamie Coultois from Putney. I just wanted to say how grateful I am to Laura for doing this, and we've had private conversations over the years about personal experiences, about our own work, particularly in the climate that we're living in right now in this nation. And I've been taking anti-racism classes and working to understand white privilege and concepts of white fragility, and having difficulty talking about the history of race and racism as one of the many issues that this addresses. And so I feel like I'm a student, and I'm still trying to figure out my role in the healing process that our nation is in. I wanted to make one exception and say that based on my experiences in Putney and my conversations with friends, that we are not ahead of this. We are far behind it. And that one of the challenges that we have as a people is to acknowledge the daily lived experience of our peers who are living constantly with microaggressions or any number of things that make living in community with all of us well-intentioned white people very challenging every day. And so I've reached out to friends of color as a queer woman who lives here, married with kids. I'm very aware of that this doesn't just address issues around race and racism, but it also invites us into conversations around gender and gender equity and so I just, and identity and a number of other things. But I do want to say that I'm looking forward to both volunteering to participate in this committee, and that one of the things I saw at the school board meeting, the new merge board met last night, and they're considering a proposal to put $100,000 into the new merge budget for diversity work that Michaela Sims has outlined with others on the Brattleboro School Board. And it would impact all the communities, all the 10 schools in the new district. And the conversations that happened in that space were both painful, but they were also, they demonstrated to me that there was a huge amount of energy and organizing that is starting to happen in all of our towns. To be eyes wide open, to have difficult conversations, and to start gaining the skills that we need in order to do the really critical work at hand for the healing and the justice work that we can all be a part of. So I just wanted to say I will volunteer to support this work, and that I'm grateful that you're all considering it, and that I look forward. I've made a number of calls to ask people to be here tonight, and if they didn't want to be here, to reach out to Laura privately, because sometimes these conversations are really hard, and I wanted to create a safe space for people to have those conversations.
You're right, we're not ahead of the ball on this, but when I'm saying that, I'm saying we haven't had a major issue come to the town yet. And so I want to be developing systems to address that before a major issue hits the town publicly to us. And so you're right, things have happened, we know that, but it hasn't happened in here yet. And I'm trying to make sure we're ready for that. So hopefully it doesn't happen in a perfect world. So.
Well, issues of accessibility have been major in this town forever, and that's why we started the committee, and it, you know, ran out of steam, but that is a major issue. And people say, well, we don't see people with disabilities. Well, you don't see them because it's not accessible. There's no place, you know, that, I mean, the general store, when you put that at accessibility, and the library put it in, hallelujah, and, you know, a couple other places, for me screaming. And I'm glad that that's included. When you were reading off, I was a little afraid we weren't going to include that. So thank you.
And I spoke out of turn again because it hasn't come to this in my time. So, but there's a long history before me.
Mr. Fairman.
Mr. Chairman, my friend Eva is right, except of course when she alleged that I'm a troublemaker.
I don't know.
I think that's public knowledge anyway. So.
Yeah.
Well, we're sitting together, so that has something to
Well, then I can neither confirm nor deny, as they say at higher levels. But I'm not sure how the question was left of Putney residents versus people who are not Putney residents. I would suggest and actually caution that we make it Putney residents, because Putney residents have made the commitment to Putney versus opening it to the possibility, given that these can be controversial matters, of someone coming in from outside who has a personal agenda. While Putney residents have a right to be here.
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, no, I was viewing it from the opposite of, you know, well, somebody potentially having an agenda, but an appropriate agenda. But if somebody had an inappropriate agenda, that would very much change that equation. So, yeah, that's certainly worth considering.
Well, you know, the thing is, Mr. Chairman, sorry.
No, oh, well, okay. Thank you, Howard. A lot of people, 05346, think they live in Putney.
Yes.
And I remember the years when I was in the
Yeah.
fire department, and people said to me in Westminster West, no, I can't help out with the Westminster Fire Department because Putney's my town. I mean, you know, we're suffering in a time of, you know, click, click on the, but we don't know jack shit about what's in the paper or who's elected or can name your select board. I mean, we're ignorant people here.
Ruby, speak for yourself.
Ruby McAdoo, hi. I just wanted to kind of chime in about both this issue about residency, but generally speaking, I think we have a number of schools in our town, and many of them already have diversity work going on. I know the Putney School just hired, you know, someone for diversity. I know there are a number of landmark people here, and their presence here indicates their interest. And so I think that you as a select board would be remiss if you didn't reach out to them and more prior to appointment if you go forward with this. But the other question there, and I think it's really a question for, you know, Landmark might be able to speak to it now, but if there's someone working in these communities who doesn't live in Putney, it would be super sad to not include them.
Yeah.
They could involve themselves without being appointed to the committee. This is true.
Yes.
For sure, but I think it's something to consider, particularly if if it's not a statutory limitation that you're looking at, it's really a decision on your part.
Yeah.
That's great, and a great point about the schools.
Hi, so I'm from Landmark College, and I'm here with some of my colleagues as well who work in the area of diversity and inclusion in student affairs. First, with all the procedural issues and other things that have been raised about the statutes and statutory regulations, with great respect to all of those, we just want to say that we are very excited to see the town having this discussion. Landmark College always wants to be a community that is found to be inclusive for everybody who steps on campus, whether it's race, religion, identity, and also inclusive of neurodiversity. The idea that our brains and the differences of our brains are what make us special and contributing members to society. So over the past few years, we've been really working to increase our own awareness, our own reflection on how we're providing that inclusive community on campus, and we continue to realize every year, even as we provide more opportunities, we know that there's a ways to go. So it's certainly a long but very worthwhile road, and it's provided a lot of opportunities for members of our community to open our eyes to things that we've never seen before, even though we thought we were very accepting, inclusive individuals. So I'll let my colleagues here introduce themselves, just because I think that would be helpful. But thank you for considering this, and we are committed as partners, whether we're invited to be on the committee or just as partners as a neighbor in Putney, to really partner with you for this really important work. I don't know if Kelly or Mark have anything else to say, or just to introduce yourselves.
How you guys doing? My name is Mark Thurman. I'm actually the coordinator of diversity and inclusion at Landmark College. I also was a student there, and I think, you know, definitely coming here 5 years ago as a student definitely was, you know, an eye-opener for me. It's different. But I honestly can say that I fell in love with the community to the point where it's like now I'm working here, so it's like I really love the community, and I love the fact that we're moving into a direction where we're wanting to open those eyes to get everyone woke, per se. And is it a challenge? It is a challenge, but without challenges, then we can't make progress. So I believe that what we're doing on campus with the students is we're challenging them, but we're making progress. And you see these students who have questions, and the way that they think and the way that the world is shaping right now, you're starting to see them have a say, and this is not just for people of color, but it's for everyone. Everyone is having an opinion but coming together. So we're seeing that at Landmark College. So just imagine if we take what we're doing there and working with Putney and doing that within the community, it's only going to make more progress, and it's just all of us coming together. So I really liked everything that you said and wanting this to happen. And my name is Mark Thurman, and I'm here, so let me know. Yeah.
Mark, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Wouldn't it be something if we had people on the committee, one from each school and 2 people from the town? That'd be something. You all really addressed and have addressed it, an old, funky school, the Windham College, in terms of issues of accessibility, done a fabulous job and need to do more, but it's quite remarkable work that's been done over there about accessibility.
Okay.
Thank you.
Annie?
Hi, I'm Ann Beekman, the last chair of the Putney Town School Board and vice chair of the newly merged school board. I'd also like to thank you for taking this into consideration. We have been doing work on these issues in all of the schools throughout the district, the supervisory union, and if this town would join us, it would probably make it a much better place and give us a consistent place to work with. The children get their lessons in school and they'll walk out into a community that supports this. And I think it could be part of a much bigger picture that could be a really great thing for all of us.
Thank you.
One of the things that Karen and I talked about when she and I were talking, I called her to talk about some of the procedural stuff. But Karen was also saying, should we be, potentially looking at this as a more regional issue? And I think a lot of what people are saying is just addressing exactly that. How we do it in Putney and how we integrate that into a more regional picture is important, including the schools, I think is important. I know that the new diversity coordinator up at Putney starts right about now, and she's certainly going to have her hands full for a little while, but I'm guessing she would certainly be interested in participating in ways possible. So my feeling is, I don't know whether you want to take this back to the drawing board and try and figure out
Revise the language.
Revise the language, and then, we certainly would ultimately, because of the nature of this, we would want to vet it through legal anyway, but then also invite others who, Mark, for example, might offer expertise that we don't have, and some others in the community that would have that expertise that might be helpful in drafting language that's productive and doesn't inhibit us in any way.
Right.
And I think that, certainly the nature of this is what I think we would all like and hope to include, but sort of how to do that in the way that's appropriate particularly for the legal verbiage for us is probably pretty important. So I would suggest that we table it for the moment and then revisit it when you have a draft that feels more complete, and maybe Mr. Fairman would be willing to.
I was just gonna ask.
Another thing, the fact that sidewalk is going in means so much to people in chairs.
Yeah.
Really, and I see people, because I eat over there. I go with one of your teachers and eat meals, and I see the accessibility to that cafeteria, and I think, wouldn't it be something if you could get in a chair, get out here, and blink of an eye, any one of you can be in a chair. And
Been there.
happened to me, it happened to you when you broke everything.
Yeah.
So let's make sure that it is the committee, the wide view. Because there is a tendency in these times to look at the awful things that are happening to transgender people in the United States, the murder and so on, and we do not want other people to be left out, because it's so important, this idea of inclusiveness.
Yeah.
I agree.
And we're constantly learning,
Yeah. Okay,
Learning. I live a very private life. All of this is learning.
It's all
I live
learning
and
for
work
all of
in
us. Yes, definitely.
I wondered how many of the Putney Town committees are ad hoc?
You know, that's a slightly complicated question. I mean, the Public Safety Committee was ad hoc, but then, affordable housing was well, I mean, that was I don't know whether we would have called that a standing committee per se.
We usually sat down.
It really depends on the need. I mean, there are ad hoc committees that, for example, the tax exempt committee, they had a very sort of finite mission for the period that they were doing what they were doing, met regularly, did it all very effectively, and then, basically completed their charge. With public safety, as it comes up, we invite people to be reconvened on the committee if they're willing to continue, so on and so forth. So the process is a little ad hoc, I would say, and that results in committees that are available when we need them, but not necessarily held to the statutory requirements that I'm going to tune up on a little bit that Mr. Fairman was pointing out about what a committee. So I don't have a clear answer for you on
My
that.
clarification was the work that I've done ad hoc usually meant temporary. And so
Right.
I just wanted to clarify that there was nothing that implied that this work is temporary or that there is any finish line that will be reached, but that it is a process by which we will continue to do this work. And so I just wanted to encourage us, if I didn't understand something, about how Vermont law is written and what that implies, I just wanted to discourage us from creating that. I heard a recommendation of this being an ad hoc committee, and I wanted to suggest that it not get that designation.
Well, I think my question about that was based on in the possible recommended charges for the committee. It was to provide recommendations to the select board about the need for a permanent advisory committee. So, to me, that says potentially we'd be talking about it as far as the legality is concerned, I use the term ad hoc loosely, but a committee to explore what we need and how to go about it. And, the end result, I wasn't implying or wasn't intending to imply that it should be a temporary committee. It's just there's sort of two different uses of the language in here that implied that maybe we're looking at something temporary with the possibility of advising something more long-term. So,
And that was my language in thinking that, as the committee gels and figures out what they need to do, they will come back to us and let us know what that committee should look like down the road. So we could choose not to include that, but I really like the idea of the committee growing its own legs and advising us on what's needed.
Yeah, I mean, my feeling would be initially, in many ways, it's sort of an exploratory committee that's looking at what we can do and how we can do it within the constraints of statute, et cetera. And I think that it's important, as Eva pointed out, if we put too many restrictions on it in various different ways, we're likely to discourage people who would like to be involved who can't because of various commitments, et cetera. So I think that sort of looser language to begin with is good, and that tightens up over time, possibly, sort of depending on what a committee discovers about the needs, so. All right, so, we can certainly revisit this in a couple weeks, and if you're sort of more ready then, or if you say, I need a couple more weeks, then we see where we get to from there. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah, I say we definitely revisit it in a couple of weeks, and hopefully we'll have something that we can actually vote on, but if we have to keep reworking it, we work at it until we get it right.
Yeah.
And thank you all for being patient in this process. It's learning for all of us.
Yeah, and thank you for coming to a select board meeting to discuss it, because as we know, that doesn't always happen in select board meetings.
Lots of empty nets here.
Obviously a topic of significant interest, not surprisingly. And we had already discussed the fact that we were all sort of conceptually very much in favor of this, just sort of the process is, we
Outlining it.
gotta work it out thoroughly, so.
And the process has to be done publicly, so.
Exactly, so we
Our
can't,
rough drafts are.
yeah,
But I have all of your contact information, I will be reaching out.
and I think as Jamie indicated, if you hear of people who are interested, whether they contact Laura or, committees tend to go through Karen somewhat for
Right.
at least getting information, so, certainly encourage people to.
I'm in the process of communicating with, I think, about 6 people. And so I knew tonight was the beginning, and so I will continue that and report back to Laura what I find out.
Yeah.
I really have heard also from leaders of color within the state of Vermont, in an effort for well-intentioned white allies to identify solutions. People are continuously saying, not about us, without us. And
Yeah.
so I've been
Yeah.
really taking that very seriously and reaching out. And I appreciate Eva reminding me of all of the language that exists within this resolution. So, yeah, thanks.
And it might beg the question sooner, and I think it was Mr. Fairman who sort of raised this topic, but before a committee is formed, there might want to be a public forum of some sort to try and reach out to just say, hey, we're thinking about this. A, it would generate interest. B, it would bring forward presumably people who were interested for the right reasons. And also just inform people about what the process, because I think that very much that concept of, wait a minute, suddenly there's 5 white people sitting in town hall saying we're a committee on diversity, that's tricky. So, I think we, probably a public forum before we appointed anybody to a committee would not be.
The only way I found out about it was that it was on Facebook today. So I'm curious I think that's so important, the whole town, whether they read the paper or not.
Or an article and invite publicity in any ways. I would certainly think the Commons would be more than happy to come to a public forum about something like this.
Yeah.
Good, well, thank you all.
Great.
Important
Thank you.
stuff.
Thank you for the input.
Thank you, David, for learning this thing.
I'm learning.
All right, so feel free to leave if you want to, but feel free to
Hang out.
stay if you want to, because we're going right to the municipal tax rate, and it's pretty exciting.
It looks like it's the same. That's really exciting. That's really exciting.
I did, what's your name? Jamie Contois, thank you, yeah.
All right, so Karen, do you want to, thanks for coming, see ya.
Thank you.
I know, exactly. Good night, Aaron.
Are you leaving or are you going to sit up front? You're leaving.
Now
Goodbye.
I've got it back.
You've seen that.
Yeah.
Don't pressure the poor guy.
It's not that I don't enjoy the process.
Yeah, no.
Thank
You're
you,
welcome
Charlie.
anytime, of course.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you all.
Certainly.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so Karen, you wanna, we're gonna, our discussion is gonna be limited, so,
That's good.
yeah.
There you go.
Dinner minutes, thank you.
Exactly.
Just what we needed.
All right.
I'm going to sit for a few more minutes and then I'll.
So on the agenda is adopt municipal tax rate. So we had this discussion the last time. Thank you, Eva.
You're welcome.
And so as you know, we don't have the educational tax rate yet,
Right,
and we may not have it until July 15th.
right.
So legally, tax bills need to be out to the community 30 days prior to when they're due, which will be August 16th.
Well, that makes it exciting.
So, I brought this back to the table to see if you would like to adopt the municipal tax rate, because the educational tax rate is set by the state. You cannot change it.
Now, we have 2020 here and 2019 here.
Oh, yeah, it should be 2020.
That's what I was thinking. See ya.
Bye, Eva.
Oh, yeah, don't want to go without that.
Thank you all for
Good
your,
night. Good night.
Yeah.
thank you so much. And you have to be guarded, you know, be careful, because,
Well, especially on procedural.
yeah, okay, I appreciate that, because you got Howard over here, you got me listening and looking. So when I show up, you know, because
There's
Laura,
something
that's wonderful that you put this out, but it really is too bad that it didn't go out all over, you know, rather.
well.
Yeah, no, but I mean, that was just, to me, that was a little, I was a little annoyed to read it on Facebook and not find, because I read everything. So I would have appreciated knowing it, because I would have rounded up half a dozen more people.
Okay, well,
So-
we'll get it going
Okay,
there for
all
you.
right, well, thank you.
See you, guys. Have a good night.
Fire station. So the 2020 tax rate, general fund, highway fund, is in the left-hand column, and then the 2019 rates are in the right column there. So what I wanted to point out is that the municipal tax rate did not go up based on the grand list. So the grand list went up, and the tax rate stayed about the same. So that is really good news.
So just for our listening audience, our general fund tax rate would be 0.4217. Compared
Correct.
to last year, it was 0.4214. So it's up, but what is that, the 10,000th column, thousandths column?
Yeah.
It's up a teeny tiny fraction of a cent.
003.
And the highway department tax rate proposed for 2020 is 0.3461. Last year it was 0.3462, so it actually came down just a touch, which leaves the total tax rate in both cases not rounded out to the fourth number, but at 0.768. So
The same as last
again,
year.
virtually the same until
Yes.
you break it down to the
Right.
many small parts. And then our local agreement tax rate would be.
That's gonna change.
Oh, it is?
That's not set yet, because I can't,
Because it's based on,
yeah, the education, the difference.
yeah, okay.
So we can't set that yet, but just to let
Hey,
everyone know.
educate me, just one sentence. Why? Because we're affected by the rate that the state sets for the education tax? Is that the,
Because our district is merged and they haven't set their rate yet.
But the local agreement rate, why is that dependent on the education rate?
I was
And
hoping
if
you
you
were
can,
gonna answer.
if you can answer that,
No,
you get a
I
bonus
know.
point, because I know I can't answer that. I mean, the local agreement rate is based on exemption for primarily military vets.
And the homestead exemption, I think, impacts that local agreement as well, and those won't be out until,
The education
well,
tax rate comes
July
out.
1st usually.
Yeah,
So we should be seeing downloads for homestead exemptions. So it's all based on
so
reduction.
very basically, the local agreement rate is things that have been voted by the voters of Putney to exempt beyond sort of the norm. So essentially, we have said, and again, the most sort of noticeable example is an exemption for veterans that earn under $40,000 a year. I think it is something.
Yeah.
I can't remember the exact details of it, but
It is
to exempt
40,000.
them from taxes over and above what they would pay if their income was higher than that sort of thing. So we've essentially voted to say, exactly, we
right.
voted to say, we want to support this group of
Got it.
people in this small way
Got it.
that we can. that's allowed for us to do, so, but it's based
Right.
on homestead rates, et cetera.
And the local agreement basically makes up that difference that those exemptions allow for.
And when you look at it, you
So
know,
that
you're,
raises the regular rate by that much to cover
Right,
the difference for the
right,
places
right.
that we have
Yep.
exempted to some
Yeah.
degree.
exactly.
And some
Okay,
towns
now I
don't
understand.
have this local agreement.
Okay.
Putney does, but.
And it's very specific as to how you can go about it and how it has to be
Right.
voted on. And just to note, you know, I mean, it starts in the third rounding column, so it's .0069. It's, you know, it's, yeah, exactly. But when you look at the overall picture, you know, it raises 16,000, 17,000 bucks. So, you know, it's a very, very minimal impact on our taxes, but,
Can have a big effect in an individual
On
case or two.
individual, exactly.
Right.
I understand, that makes sense. Thank you for that.
Yeah, so we can hold off on this.
Does it matter if we hold off? Is it advantageous to us to hold
Well,
off?
July 3rd, we have another meeting. So I'm hoping we see something.
When do we have to send it out by then?
Well, we'd like to get the tax bills ready like July 1st.
Okay,
So we have time to get them out to the community.
and you need this voted
Yeah.
on to do that.
the only, yeah, I mean, the
Yes.
only thing,
25th.
but
Yeah, but I can't do it without the educational tax anyway, David?
for the local rate.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
for the local agreement. So we could go ahead and approve the highway and the general fund rate, just so it's done, if we
Right.
want to. But we're still gonna have to.
Does that help you
see what the local
prepare?
agreement rate is.
Having those two pieces in place and while you're still waiting for the tech,
Yes,
that
'cause I
helps?
can plug those numbers in now.
Great, yeah, so why
And,
wouldn't we do that?
Right, and they're not gonna change.
That's the main thing.
Right.
Is there anything that could change them between now and
No.
July 3rd? Because
No.
if that's the
There you go.
case.
No, they're set
So-
at this point.
Do you want
Because
me
it's
to,
based
Make a
on the
motion,
grand
yeah.
list.
do you want me to make a motion with the general fund and highway tax rate separated out? Or
Yes, for a total of,
for
yeah.
a total of, okay. So I move that we approve the 2020 tax rate, general fund at .4217 cents, the highway tax rate at .3461 cents, for a total tax rate of .768 cents
For the municipality.
for the municipality.
And I second that.
Okay, and, so it's been moved and seconded. Just one thing I want to point out, and this is obvious, but those numbers are are not whole cents, but they are fractions of cents.
Yes.
So that represents 34 cents per no, 0.34 cents per dollar.
Okay.
So, maybe I'm making it more confusing than it
No,
already
I-
is.
No, it's really
But
good point for you to make.
it's not a
Yeah.
fraction.
It's 34
These-
cents and it's
Yeah.
not.
Well, it is, it's 34 cents per hundred.
Yeah.
Is what it is. So it's a fraction of the amount per hundred. So it represents 34, you know, basically rounded up, 35 cents for highway and 42 cents rounded down for general fund, for a total of 76, just under 77 cents per $100 of value per grand list. So, if there's no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
And just to acknowledge that we will look at the local agreement tax rate
Yeah.
when we can
Yeah.
as a result of adjustments to the education tax. And we have no ability to influence the education tax rate, so that's sort of out of our,
We can go vote at the.
yes, you can.
That's where we influence.
But we can't decide it here.
So as soon as we
can't
get
decide
it, we can just do it, we can just put it in once.
Because
we
that's
don't
the
have to
piece
come
that's
back to the
missing.
select
For the
board.
educational, but
Right,
you
right.
do for the local tax, which
Yeah,
is based on
yeah.
the educational, so. All right,
Wow.
financials.
So I printed out the financials again. We have warrants tonight, which we've prepaid some invoices. I'll explain that when we get there. But we don't have another meeting until July 3rd. So we will close out the year
previous to, yeah.
June 28th.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I wanted to give you the financials. These, once we post, well, everything's posted now anyway, right?
Has anything changed dramatically since we last looked at the financials?
No, we're still trying to collect revenue, so,
No, it's
That's
not listed. If you
uncollected.
ran this, no, it's not listed. So
Okay.
this doesn't have a.
Those
today's-
warrants.
okay, so this
Those
will
warrants.
change. This is gonna change
Yeah.
based on these warrants right here.
Between now and July 1, or
Right.
June 28th.
Yeah, yeah.
What were we concerned about last time? I think there's a couple areas, fire department was one, wasn't it?
Fire department was over budget, but that was sort of acknowledged for various different reasons.
Came up with-
Town clerk's office was over.
Was over a little bit. Not, yeah, more than a little bit, but not.
Feeling I came away with, and I don't remember exactly, was that there were a bunch of things that were also under, and it seemed to, in the big picture, balance out pretty well.
Right.
But that was the feeling I had.
So right now, the general fund is negative $23,370.
And it's your assumption that that's about where it will be when we finish out the year?
That's what we're thinking, but
And
I
where's
can't-
highway?
Highway is ahead. So highway is, they have $74,197 right now in their budget. So they're in good shape.
They're right on target though, right?
They usually have a reserve, Laura.
Okay.
So, and it can average between like 25,000, and last year it was like 54,000. Surplus, I don't wanna say reserve, it's a surplus.
But this is not unusual, I mean,
Right,
it's a surplus. You know, we only just divided the highway and the general fund into two separate budgets relatively recently. So it was often the highway for all practical purposes. I mean, the highway is so weather dependent. You know, we can shoot through a huge amount of money in the highway department in a bad winter, or we get lucky.
Right, them having a surplus is not a bad
And
thing.
so, yeah, no, it's not a bad thing, and it's also, you know, I mean, now that they're two separate funds, technically we can't spend the one for the other,
we can't.
but, exactly, but, you know, depending on how you look at it, it's all still the same money, because it's all state tax rate money, so.
What happens to that money at the end of this year? Does it go back into a general fund, or does it stay in the highway?
No, it's designated for, that's the difference between,
Right.
it used to be that the general fund and the highway fund, or that the general fund included the highway fund. For the purposes of accounting, it's simpler and cleaner for it to be a separate highway fund, but it makes it so that we can't put that back from one to the other.
But it also,
So,
because we have a surplus in the highway fund, we're not looking for money.
To make up that
That's
money.
like, then
Exactly.
use the
Right.
money from somewhere else.
Yeah.
I get it.
So, and if you look at the big picture, I mean, you were saying that the highway department is up by roughly how much? 70?
Yes,
But,
74.
but we're down by 23, so
Correct.
essentially we're coming out at year end all around with a $50,000 surplus. That surplus is limited in what it can be expended on, and it will go into the highway fund, but it means that we don't have to raise as much money for the highway fund,
Kind
so.
of a miracle with the mud season we had. You know, really.
Right. So there may be some adjustments at the end of the year, because we'll.
Budget has been here, John?
No, he has
Not
not
yet.
been here yet. I don't expect to see anything from him until July.
Okay.
But, tax sales. So the list went to the attorney's office.
Mhm.
So if we have our tax sale, we can recoup some of the delinquent taxes before the end of August. That can be put on this year's fiscal year as revenue, so that will help. So there's still things that are moving, so I can't really predict where we're gonna end up.
And we have 60 days after July 1st to reconcile all of that.
Right.
So,
Right.
you know, we won't really know until 60 days out.
Yeah, end of
We'll sort of
August.
have- Exactly. We'll
End
have
of August.
a sense. But everything else, pretty much everything closes out except for uncollected.
Yes. Yeah.
So, you know, we'll know where we are, give or take. however much that uncollected is. And, you know, that, as we've talked about before, the tax sale tends to either generate money from the tax sale or
People coming
is a
up.
pretty strong motivator for people to get caught up. So,
And looking at this is very typical of years past. None of this is out of line with anything.
Not surprising.
I have no
No.
history, so just,
No.
yeah, good.
no, and there's, you know, there's almost always some surplus here, some deficit here, and it works out. You know, typically, my experience is typically we run a small surplus most years,
Good.
which is good. I mean, I think that's a better budgeting indicator of budgeting process than running a small deficit most years.
Mhm.
You know, if we were always under budgeting, that doesn't make sense. It's better to be a little more realistic with our budget and end up with a little bit of a surplus than it is to end up a little behind, and then you have to make it up every year.
And not only that, there's also services that wouldn't be taken care of the way they ought to be, for maybe if you have a deficit.
If you start feeling like it's running a
You
deficit.
start dealing with a whole
Yeah.
different kind of problem, not just numbers.
Yeah.
Money, right?
All right.
There it is.
Town manager support, you got anything or not?
I thought I had the pool.
Oh, the pool.
It will be opening Saturday at noon. Just to fill you in, so PVC pipes burst, they're underground.
Oh, great.
They go to the return in the suction
Mhm.
in the pool. Simon's Operations, we're up there. Tyler dug it out with the backhoe. They isolated.
Tyler, our road guy.
Yeah.
Not Tyler Electric.
Right, Tyler from the highway department. They isolated broken pipes that we didn't actually need. We can still run the jets and the filtration. Those pipes have been repaired. And they were still working on them today, but for right
So he came
now,
right out. The pool guy ended up doing it.
no,
Oh,
Simon's Operations
oh,
did
really?
it.
Okay.
So I didn't know this, but Simon's Operations, who takes care, they're the contractor for the wastewater treatment plant,
Water, wastewater,
Yes.
and historically they've taken care of the pool for us.
which I didn't realize, so.
Oh, you didn't?
No. So I knew Joe did
Did that.
things at the pool,
Yeah,
and Chris Hayes stated that, yeah, we painted the pool, the inside of the
Yeah.
pool twice. And I'm like, okay, I didn't know that. But, so any repair up there, Simon's Operations takes care of it. Because it was a regular day, regular work day, no labor will be incurred.
oh, good.
Basically, it's materials.
Nice.
Which is, BBC's pretty reasonable.
Yes.
Wow.
So,
Nice.
but in the future, we are gonna have to address,
That issue.
either, run new pipes. But the pool does need some maintenance.
Yes, and, you know, we should, before we cover that back up, we should address anything and everything we can in that area.
Should that be the capital
Why weren't
plan?
they deep enough that they didn't freeze?
None of it's deep, well, what happens,
You have
Is
to
it land
winterize it a certain way.
It's never covered up.
Well,
No.
no, and it's not drained either,
No,
but it has to be
it's
drained to a certain depth.
Yeah.
And then in,
And there isn't non-toxic antifreeze put into the system in the winter to keep it from freezing.
but certain parts of it, I think,
Yeah.
in the filtration system, but not in the whole pool itself.
no, not in the whole pool.
Good.
We just kind of,
ecosystems in the pool,
Yeah.
like,
but,
They didn't- I'm sorry.
we end up with like guppies and.
yeah,
Yeah, I remember the first year the first pool was there, and
Right.
the 8th grader's job was to clean it. And we went down and cleaned it. It was
Oh,
an
my.
experience,
yeah, last year was nasty too, but, so you have to cap all the jets and, the suction. And if you don't do it right, the water leaks through and gets into the pipes underground.
Drain.
They freeze. And then inside the pool house, you take the caps off. Well, last year they had rats up in the pipes. So,
Two years ago, we had rats,
Right.
so last year they left them, they capped them,
yeah,
and that seems to have resulted in somehow allowing water to siphon back,
yeah.
Ah,
so.
And you have to blow out all those pipes
I was gonna say,
before
yeah.
you cap them off.
But it's all, no, I was surprised to see when it's dug up, all of the plumbing is not even 12 inches under the
Right.
surface.
That's not adequate at all.
Well, no, but I don't think you could go deeper. It looks like it's designed the way it needs to be. I don't know how pools typically work, but,
Well, Joe puts blue board over
Over
that
that, right.
PVC and then they cover it. So we're hoping to get it covered Friday morning.
but that's still pretty minimal protection.
It's very minimal, it's gotta be dry,
Yeah.
it needs to be dry or it's gonna
Exactly.
freeze.
That's,
Right.
that's the,
Dry.
that's what
Yeah.
happened this year, is that
Yeah.
it wasn't quite dried
Right.
out, so.
So that's been resolved. We're gonna open up on Saturday at noon. And the slide is down.
Good.
It's out of there.
And a new one is ordered or not?
No, not yet. We're just gonna, we're making palm trees out of that. That's funny.
Is there a reason to hold off on it? Financial?
No, we need about, it's less than $4,000.
So, I'm not trying to put you on the spot,
Right,
but
right.
why aren't we just ordering one?
Well, for right now, general funds running a deficit, so I
And we
don't
can't
really-
take it out of highway?
No. We have,
We just charge.
Hey, the highway guy's up there digging the pipes up, so let's put it in this.
That was
They
your
can
best
install
call.
it.
don't go there, all right?
So community members did offer again, that if we
I think
run
for
into any-
$4,000, I
I'm
mean,
just
when it
letting
was
you know,
$12,000, I could
Yeah.
see doing a GoFundMe
Yeah.
page. The old slide is down, we're making progress,
Okay.
and we do have a reserve fund.
Yeah, I mean, my personal feeling
Undesignated.
would be, and this is strictly my personal feeling, is
Yeah.
that, you know, we've been 2 years without it, for $4,000, we should just buy one and put it in and let
Yeah.
the kids enjoy it, and, you know, about 3.
Yeah, I think
So-
It's gonna be a smaller, different type of slide, because that type is like 12 grand. So
Right.
it's gonna be it's a smaller.
Well, that,
No, it's still 7.5 feet tall, though, it's gonna serve
it's
the same purpose,
right.
you know?
No, and it's not, honestly,
And
the kids aren't gonna care that much as
Right.
long as they have a
Right,
slide, you
right.
know?
Having a slide is a luxury, and they should be glad whatever the slide.
Well, the problem has been, David, that the slide has been closed for 2 years.
Right.
So they've been sitting there looking at that, it's like having, you know,
torturous.
I
the
get
car of your dreams parked in your front yard, but you don't have the keys to it, you know? So,
Yeah, it's, as a parent, I can tell you, it
Yeah.
was torturous.
yeah. So, I mean,
I don't mind, you know, we can find it, and I think it's better that we do it this year, knowing where we are right now. I mean,
does anybody disagree?
I think you should put the slide in.
Yeah,
I think we
I
should
say
get
go
the
for it.
cheapest, safest one we can get and just put it in. That's what I think. I don't really have any experience to know whether or not
Yeah.
that should wait until we
right,
know.
Well, I
The
mean,
money's gonna be
we
or
could
not.
wait until,
Right.
July 1.
Right.
yeah, it would be a new fiscal year, we might be better off anyway.
But if we're gonna take it out of the
Financially.
reserve fund, then I'm not sure it matters, so.
Right.
I would say the longer we have the slide in place at the pool, the better, you know. So my recommendation would be go ahead and get it and sort of as soon as possible and not worry, I mean, not that we're not worried about money, obviously, but,
We may not
But
see,
it's a
they may
small
not come in
expenditure.
until after July 1st anyway.
right, exactly. So we should probably go ahead and get it ordered and hope for it to come quickly. I'm sure also, I would be surprised, depending on who the supplier is if you said, hey, you know, we're happy to give you a down payment and settle up the rest after
Right.
July 1, they're likely to do that, you know,
Yeah.
so. But
How does installation look for that?
I'm not sure how that's gonna work yet,
that's not an installed price.
no.
And who's this, is this from somebody local or not?
No, it's just from a company that we looked at. We've been getting catalogs, so. And Bev actually recommended a couple companies.
For the slide itself?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm certainly happy to lend, you know how good I am at following.
You're on camera right now, Josh, I heard that.
I was gonna say,
The
lend
whole
technical
world
expertise.
just heard that.
I'm perfectly happy to recruit David to work on this for you.
You get the slide and you want me to
We
put
can
it in,
figure
it'll
it
be in
out.
that day.
Exactly,
Okay.
we can figure
there's
it out. I'm
diversity.
sure.
The biggest thing
Sorry.
the biggest thing is I'm worried that I'm gonna order one thinking in my mind that it's gonna work and fit in the space and then get it here and find out it doesn't.
Well,
So it
well,
needs
why
I
doesn't-
somebody-
wouldn't mind getting
Why,
some
why
dimensions,
doesn't,
yeah.
You should like go
Why
with
don't-
me, look at what we're looking at and make sure that.
Here we
I'm
go.
not
you
ordering
can ask
something
one,
that's
or you
wrong.
can ask one or more of us to do that with you.
There isn't anybody local with a pool company that we know well that wouldn't give us a slide that's perfectly adequate for a lot less
I
money.
asked Brattleboro if they
Yeah.
had an extra one just laying around, but they didn't.
What about, who does pools and does? Jack
Well,
Falvey still do pools?
Falvey
I used to
does.
know Jack.
They're really busy.
They're super busy.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, he too busy to sell us a slide for a good price?
I mean, Alan Pool and Spa, they, you know.
You know, the problem
Cheshire.
is, as you well know, what Falvey can purchase one through their
Right.
supplier and then resell it versus what we can find it for
Right.
online,
Yeah, I know.
it's probably not,
Can we get
Probably not
dimensions
worth it.
online? And
Yeah.
then I'll go out with a tape measure and I'll see if it'll fit there.
Yeah.
see, now he's on camera. Good.
All
I
right.
will help. Did your cabinet get
I heard
fixed
that.
when you asked or didn't it?
Ooh. Oh, boy, well,
Yeah, but he fixed my door
yeah,
knob.
did your door lock get spontaneously
There you go, there you go,
fixed
there
when
you
you
go.
didn't even ask? Anyway,
Anyways,
we still got front doors and we got
Right.
Oh,
other
there's plenty
things
to
to work on.
fix.
Yeah.
That's next fiscal year too, Josh. Houghton Brook Road, as you know, the project started on Monday. So they've been busy up there. How's it going? I haven't really seen Brian, so I think he's busy right now. Okay. That's probably good.
It's a pretty straight ahead site though.
Mhm.
It's not a bad site.
Yeah.
Right? It's
With good,
level,
good
there's
access too.
There's good
Yeah.
access on both sides. It wasn't too many trees to deal with. It seemed like the fill was pretty easily moved.
Yeah,
Looked, when I went out there, it looked at,
Yeah,
you know,
good.
not an excavator, but
Well, thanks for the report. I
yeah,
appreciate
I
it.
do drive around and look at things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
nice.
Go for walks on old trails and stuff.
All right,
The grader is out. We were waiting on chloride.
grader's out. Oh.
Yes.
I thought you were.
No, the
like,
grader
out
is
of
out
service.
grading
Yeah,
roads.
okay, good.
Now that we have chloride,
Yeah,
he will not be out there if it's raining.
right.
The grader will not be running if it's raining. So, roads are getting taken care of. Mowing is being done because I got a phone call. So I know that's happening as well. And, that's about it. Oh, there is one other thing I want to mention. Talking about committees and boards, we have several board openings. So Energy Committee is looking for 4 members. Conservation Commission is down 3 members. Planning Commission is 2 members. Development Review Board is looking for 1. There's still an opening for Windham Regional Commissioner to represent the town of Putney. And I probably can come up with a couple more. So if anybody wants to volunteer, please come to the office.
All right. Warrants?
Yes, we have warrants.
I move that we approve and execute the warrants as presented upon completion of review.
And I second that. Is that right?
Thank you.
Sorry, I was
Been moved
spaced
and
out for a
seconded.
second.
That's where I always
I actually
spaced out when I was in that
didn't
seat.
It's been moved and seconded to approve and execute the warrants as presented upon review. If no further discussion, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Payroll warrant dated June 11th, 2019 in the amount of $9,067.43. This includes the library.
I'm sorry.
Payroll warrant dated June 18th, 2019, in the amount of $6,530.44. You will see lifeguards on this warrant.
Bi-weekly for.
Is everybody else bi-weekly too? Just
We will see lifeguards on
Those
this?
are people
Yes.
who get electronic deposits.
So,
No,
like
but
Matthew
Just
Brooks.
curious, it's a big, it's a
and
big
everything.
number,
Right,
and
just
I've
like
just, I've
starting
seen it a
off
lot of
with
times.
Yes.
Something?
And I wonder-
Sophia Murray.
That's why every other week the warrants are-
So these
Okay.
names that you don't
It's
recognize.
twice a day, every other week.
Are Holcomb, and you got Beverly on there.
Because we have the
So-
library.
Full.
Okay.
So they're
Yeah,
pool
she gets
people
paid.
opening up the pool, doing cleaning.
Twice a month, yeah.
Getting ready.
Or every
So
2
you
weeks.
get that once a week. Okay, thank you. That's, I wondered about that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Accounts payable warrant dated 6/8 through 6/21/2019, in the amount of $170,769.66. This warrant, you will see there are prepaids for July 1st, which is next fiscal year, of $76,270.16. So bills are due July 1st, and we are able to prepay those. They will be registered in the next fiscal year. Okay? One other check that did go out on this warrant is $48,920.80 to Zaluzny Excavating. It's the first payment requisition for the sidewalk project. So we will be seeing those, they're gonna be more,
Regularly.
yeah, more consistent, and, so it's a big one, but,
But it would have only been like 60. All the other things.
right. So between the sidewalk and the prepays, if you, those are big numbers, so.
Mhm.
Is that?
And I do have the invoices right here.
That's the invoices.
It's like a good easier list of.
Excuse me. Do we have any other business?
No.
And I believe we do want to have an executive session.
Correct.
So we'll wait for Laura.
Will there be a decision?
No, it's informational. Well, not really informational, but it's executive session.
Discussional.
Yeah.
Do you have the sign-in sheet?
I do. Are we paused right now?
No.
No.
Would you like, and you can recess for a minute if you want. Take a break.
This we can just
We're
go.
waiting for Laura to come back.
We don't,
Amanda?
actually, we, yeah, well, now she's not there, I was gonna say that, but. So Laura, would you like to make a motion to go into executive session based on Title I VSA 313 and Title I VSA 313A1E.
Can I just say yes, I would?
Yes. Or you could say so moved.
So moved, so moved.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded to enter executive session as stated. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.